Hello, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Hilton, and I am going to be your ceramic professor this semester. I am making this video because I won't be here this week, so this will be your way of getting instruction to start learning how to throw on the wheel. So before we start, or before we sit down, I'm going to walk around the studio for a minute and show you where things are. That's Austin. Austin is our resident artist, and she's here to answer questions if you have some. So to start with, you're going to need a few tools. There are some sponges, little sponges here. There are a couple of drawers under the sponges where you'll find a wooden rib that looks like this. And you will also need a needle tool. And there aren't any in here right now, but I will put some needle tools in here. Well, that's unfortunate, but I'll put some needle tools in here for you to use, or in a bucket. Maybe this is a better place. Yeah, here's a needle tool. Looks like that. These are the three things you need: wooden rib, needle tool, sponge. You'll also need a plastic bucket. They're under there. The sink is there. You'll need some water, fill it full. And coming over to this side of the studio, there are some things called bats, these green and brown squares. So back over to, I already have some of those, back over to the wheel. I'll eventually get this someplace centered. And something like that. The wheels all have an on-off switch, and some of them have a switch that tells them to go forward or reverse. You want your wheel going in what is called a forward. I like to be crooked. In a forward motion, which means counterclockwise. You don't want your wheel going clockwise. If you do, you'll have all kinds of trouble. The wheel in our country, or most people in our country, throw with the wheel going counterclockwise. People in the East, Korea, China, Japan, they throw most often with the wheel going the other way. Not always, but most often. So, all the wheels have a pedal, and the pedal has cruise control. So if I push down on the pedal and take my foot off, it will spin. This is the way that you want to throw, at least for the first several weeks. You don't want to leave your foot on the pedal. If you do, you'll find that your wheel will be going faster and slower as you learn this process. Back to bats. These bats have two sets of holes. The holes that you want to use are the ones that are the furthest to the outside, and those two holes are going to go on these two bat pins, like so. Make sure they get placed on there well, because if you get it on there and it's not quite on the bat pin and there's weight on here and this thing starts spinning, this might come off and hit your neighbor. You don't want to do that. So make sure they're on the bat pins well, let's see, what did I forget? I forgot clay. There are buckets that are full of clay. Here, I'll just drag this one over here. They look like this. They have lids on them. They have lids for a reason. If you leave the lid off and you let the lid stay off, the clay will dry out and it won't be any good. And clay takes a lot of time and effort to make. So please, 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 please make sure the lid gets put back on. So what will happen is you'll see these things come out of these big trash cans. They're pugs of clay, and these pugs of clay are what we'll use to make our cylinders. So I'm going to spin the camera over here so that you can see what I'm going to do with this pug of clay. So this is pretty dirty right now, but hopefully it will be clean by the time you guys get here. We don't really need this much at a time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a more narrow piece of clay by throwing it down and pulling it toward me like so. And I'm hitting the back side first. And by doing that, it's starting to stretch the clay. And eventually, I can stretch it out to the point where if I cut it, I end up with fist-sized pieces of clay. And so what you want to do is you want to make 10 or 12 of these fist-sized pieces of clay before you even sit down, and you want to make them into spheres as best as you can, because it's a lot easier to throw with spheres of clay than it is squares of clay. It might even take a little bit more time than what I'm taking to do this. You don't want to get any dry clay in here. If you do, you won't be happy. So, I'm going to take these things over to my wheel, and I'm going to cover them with plastic, because I don't want them drying out by the time I get to the last one. So let's spin this back around. It'd be nice if I had a camera person. Okay. Plastic. Cover my spheres with plastic. And my tools. Alright, I also have a paper towel tool. A small piece of paper towel. I'll show you what that's used for in a little bit. And it does help to have one of these, but you don't really need it quite yet. Well, yeah, you will. Anyway. Okay. So, what you want to do first is you want to get your chair in the right position. And this particular chair actually adjusts. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer. Most of the other wheels, you don't really need to do this. But I'm going to raise the back legs of that chair up a little bit. Because it makes it easier. To be a little higher. I'm going to put the chair all the way against the wheel. And I'm going to scoot all the way against the wheel. Because what I need to do is I need to measure the distance between my hip bone right there and where the clay is going to be. Centering clay is 99% where you're sitting and how you're sitting. It has nothing to do with how strong you are, anything else. It's how you're sitting at the wheel. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to take a little bit of water and dampen, not much, the bat, and I'm going to use my arm as a hinge and throw the clay as close to the center as I can. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to center clay. And again, I said a minute ago, I said it's easier to center round clay. Well, because it's round. So we'll get the wheel spinning. That's full speed. We don't want it going full speed. We only want it going about 3/4. So somewhere in there. And I'm going to kick the pedal out of my way. So the pedal is actually right under here, okay? Because I don't want to have my foot on the pedal when I learn. Excuse me. So a little bit of water. My elbow is on my hip, and I'm measuring the distance between the clay and my hip. If I was sitting back here, that wouldn't be close enough. I'm not sure why this thing is going to sleep, but it tried. So anyway, so I'm sitting pretty close. If you're taller, you're going to sit a little further back. If you're shorter, you're going to have to even scrunch closer. Okay? And so we have water on the wheel, and all I'm doing, or water on the clay, all I'm doing is leaning forward and leaning back. And so you can see that it's already getting close to being centered. Again, leaning forward, putting water on it if I need to, and leaning back. I'm centering the clay with one hand. This is what I prefer you to learn. I'll show you a little bit of an advanced thing here in a minute in case you can't get it quite centered with one hand. So here it is out of center. It's obviously out of center. It's going whoomp, 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 and that means it's not quite where you want it to be. And a little water, elbow in my hip bone, and lean forward. You hear that click? The click is actually a good thing. It means you're pushing hard enough. And let go slow. All right, so what's the most important thing I've said so far? See if you can think about it. Two things that are really important. One, how I'm sitting, how close I'm sitting, and two, that I let go slow. Watch what happens if I let go too quickly. It's centered. If I let go too quickly, it does that. So you want to let go slowly. So it's really important to learn, you want to touch the clay slow and let go of the clay slow. All right, a while ago I said sometimes you'll get some of the clay centered, but see how my hand is still wobbling, my finger's still moving down here? It means the bottom is not quite centered. If that happens, the thing to do is to involve your other hand, your right hand. So everything now is done with the left hand so far. Now I'm going to put my left hand where it belongs. My right hand is going to go out here. I'm going to pull the clay toward me with my right hand. And that way I can center the bottom. And now I'm going to push the clay back down and push all this clay up into the pot. And we're pretty close. You can see my finger's still moving just a bit. So we'll push a little bit harder and let go slow. Letting go slow means counting to 3. So I'm pushing, count to 3, 1, 2, 3. So I usually have pretty good posture, except when I'm throwing on the wheel. When you throw on the wheel, you're essentially bending over. Your head has to be directly over the clay. Your feet have to be flat on the ground. For those of you who have really short legs, you might put a brick underneath your left foot. Some people put a brick under both, but that might help you. So one more time, clay's out of center, anchor, and lean forward, and let go slow. This is what you're looking for, something that's this shape. All right. Having a lot of goop on your hands is actually not a bad thing. It helps lubricate the clay, so don't be too concerned about all the goop. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my pinkies on the wheel head like this, my thumbs on top of the clay. I'm going to move them forward until I find the point in the middle, and I'm going to gently push down. Once I've done that, I'm going to add some water to that depression. Pinkies are back on the wheel head. Notice where my elbows are, and my head is right over the clay. I'm pushing down and rotating my wrist forward. Right now I'm measuring how far it is from here to the wheel head. Because essentially what I'm doing is I'm making a cylinder that looks like this. And I need clay down here to make the bottom of the cylinder, or the bottom of the cup. So I'm going to set the lip. You'll see me do this a lot. I'm pinching, squeezing with my left hand, and gently setting my right forefinger on top of the clay. Pardon me. All right, I'm going to stop the wheel, needle tool. I'm going to put the needle tool in the middle of the pot with it stopped. If you don't, you'll cut a hole in the bottom of your pot. And I'm going to put my finger where the clay starts. That's how thick the bottom of the clay is right now. So let's see, put it there. So it's about A quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of an inch. I'm going to make it, that's a little bit much. So I'm going to go down a hair more and stop it again. You want to do this every single pot until you've done this 1,000 times. Because what you don't want is you don't want to make this bottom so thin that you don't end up with a bottom for your cup or for your cylinder. It's really very important. And so I'm going to set my lip again. At this point, I'm going to slow the wheel down some. So now it's going less than half speed, 3/4 speed. It's going about a quarter speed, somewhere in there. Pardon me. My left hand is going to go into the center of the pot. My right hand is going to go on top. It's going to be helping my left hand out. And I'm going to open the pot by leaning backward. And if you do this right, you'll hear it click a little bit, just like it did. And let go slow. So now I have the beginning of this cup. Austin, could you do me a huge favor? Right as you go in my office to the left, there's a blue cylinder about this tall. You'll see it. It's glazed blue. Right on the left, straight ahead. I want to show you something. So, perfect. Oh, 2 of them.
There
Awesome.
you go. Which I don't know what you...
No, these are great. Okay, so this is what we're making. This is eventually what your goal is. This cylinder was about 5 inches tall. Thanks. About 5 inches tall whenever it was thrown, and that's where you're going with this. So this one was a little shorter. Notice it has a foot on the bottom. I'll talk about that. Pardon me. All right, so here we go. We're going to make the first pull, and the first pull we're going to make is with this hand. And the reason why I teach this way is we know how thick something is when we do this. This is how we'll make all the subsequent pulls. It's really much harder to decide or to discern how thick something is when I'm squeezing these fingers together. You'll see what I mean in a second. Okay, so we're going to squeeze these 2 fingers together, and it's just those 2 fingers, just the fingertips. And as I squeeze, I'm going to make a difference in the thickness, and I'm going to come up. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. Actually, no, I'm going to make a pull this way this time. So, actually part of the pull. I'm going to squeeze, and notice the difference in thickness. I did the same thing on the inside, and now I'm going to cut this so you can see what this pull really looks like. I hope. Never done this video with throwing a cylinder. So, watch what happens. I squoze, yes, that is a word. I made a difference in the thickness, and once I've made that difference in thickness, I'm going to pull up. I'm not going to make it any thinner than that. That's what the pull looks like. That's what's happening to the clay the next 3 or 4 pulls as I start this again. Okay? Right now I would ask if anybody has any questions. However, you can't really ask me questions. So, I need a new piece of clay. Let's say I messed up. I really kind of made a mistake there because I grabbed this piece of clay with wet, soggy hands. Let's just make them a little soggier. And so now this is wet and it's soggy, and I have water on my wheel head, and if I throw this on here, it's not going to want to stick, and it's going to want to do one of these things. Well, it'll happen to you. And when it happens, what you want to do, well, you want to try to avoid it by washing and drying your hands between each pot. But if a piece of clay comes off, you don't throw it away. You just keep pushing it down on the wheel head. Eventually, it will get stuck. So I'm pushing down and down and down. And I can even try to seal it by pushing on the outside of the pot. And eventually, it will get stuck like so. A little bit of water. Leaning forward. letting go slow. That's what we want to look for. My computer's trying to go to sleep again. All right, well, here I am again. I hope this is the last time. This is like the 4th time I've tried this. Not very good at photo booth, apparently. I've just made a pull with these fingers. Now I'm about to make a pull with my 2 middle fingers. These 2 will dry them off so you can see. So I'm getting ready to squeeze, make a difference in thickness. See this little lump here? As long as that lump is above your finger, you're going to make it thinner. And settle it. And get the water out of here. And here we go again. Put a little water back. We want the water on the pot, not in the bottom of the pot. We're going to squeeze. So notice my inside hand is higher than my outside hand. Did you see the pot come out a little bit? Once I've done that, make a difference in the thickness. And pull that thickness up. And settle it. So quite often what happens, you can see where I'm touching the clay, just my fingertips. Quite often what happens with new potters is we squeeze, make a difference in the thickness, and then we continue to squeeze all the way up. And what we want to do is we want to squeeze, make a difference in thickness, and make the pot that thick, period. And then squeeze a little bit more in the next pull and make it that thick, and then squeeze a little bit more in the next pull. That's what we want to do. Here we go again. Here's my inside hand pushing out, outside hand catching that lump, and making the pot that thick. And pulling all the way off the pot with my fingers adjacent to each other. And what I mean by that is my fingers are right adjacent to each other. The second my fingers get here or here, where they're not pulling next to each other, it's going to make a mess, and you won't be pleased. This is really tall. It doesn't need to be this tall. This is about 5 inches. Your pots need to be 5 inches tall. So this is too tall. We'll cut it in a second, just for fun. I'm going to make one more pull. Squeeze. Make a difference in thickness. So essentially you're counting to, I don't know, 10 by the time you get to the top. Making sure that my thing doesn't stop again. So we're going to get this thing wet. We're going to hold it tangent to the pot. Not tangent, perpendicular to the pot, not tangent to the pot. As long as it's perpendicular, I can really make this nice and smooth. I can even fix problems, let's say I bump into it. I can fix this. As long as the rib is perpendicular to the pot. And as long as my finger travels up the rib, so as long as my finger is traveling up the rib like this, if it gets out here, it'll make a mess. Set my lip. Set my lip with finger down tool. Making a U, gently send it down on there. Makes it a nice, I don't know, nice against your lips as you take a drink. Okay, I'm going to take, you know what, I'm going to clean out the bottom one more time before I do this. So this is maybe a little bit wide. It shouldn't be any wider than the palm of your hand. It's okay. I'm also going to trim this round because I'm going to be turning pots upside down. This upside down, I'm usually trimming it, so I want it as round as I can. So I'm going to take this and put it over here by my right knee and point it towards the middle of my left thigh. And gently push in, holding it really tight with two hands. And that makes the bottom pretty round. And that's going to make it easier to center later. Might as well show you this. Sometimes the lip isn't flat. Sometimes it's at an angle. And you need to cut it off because when you turn this upside down on a bat to trim, if the lip's not flat and it's like this, it's going to be really hard to center and really hard to trim. So you want to make sure that it sits 90 degrees to the bat. And so one way you can do that is to use your needle tool to trim the top. There's a fly on my pot. Can you see him? He's about to get chopped. So I'm going to take the needle tool, hold it about that far from the end with this against my wrist, and I'm going to slowly turn the wheel and point it tangent to the pot. This time tangent is good. If I do it completely tangent, it doesn't work. It just has to be at a slight angle. If it's at 90 degrees, pardon me, you'll most likely make a mess. This is a slow process. I'm going to connect my thumbs, put my middle finger of my left hand in here, and gently push the needle tool in until it cuts and then lift up. And then I would set my lip with a sponge. I'll show you again. So gently push in, wait till it touches my finger, and then lift up. And it might deform a little bit like that. It's okay, because we can fix it. But this lip is a little bit too thin at this point in time. And I'll show you when I cut it. Alright, so again, you're going to need to cut a whole bunch of these before you keep anything. So, cutting it. This is what we're looking for. I'm going to put a foot here, and this bottom is actually a little thick. It's going to be a great big thick foot. Not really, I would trim it off. So that's kind of what it would look like. And I would actually trim the feet. Whoops. I think I'm tired. So that's what it would look like. Okay. This one, hopefully, is the last one. I hope this computer behaves, or I hope that I'm smart enough to make it behave. Again, I apologize for not being here this week. It's just the way this university where I'm going to be, McMurray University, just the way the schedule, the gallery schedule worked out. So, leaning forward, water. When I'm doing this too, you should know that if I'm pushing, I'm going to push it this way, you can see that I'm actually pushing it out of center. But when I let go slow, it goes into center. So pushing it out of center and letting go slow. Push and letting go slow. Note my thumb is right over the top of the play. That's pretty well centered. It's a little bit out at the bottom, so we'll pull it up a little bit and push it down. And again, note my thumb is right over the top of the play. Alright. center. Wrist. Measure. Just wanting to fall asleep again. It's weird. I set my settings to make it where it wouldn't fall asleep, and it's still doing it. It's still moving. Okay. Stop. Measure. Every single time. Set my lip. Open. Water. Fix the bottom. Pushing in, not out. Pinch with thumb and finger, left hand. Nose right over the clay. Set the lip. Slow the wheel down. Pinch between these fingers. Connect thumbs. Make a difference in thickness. Pull up. Set the lip. A little water. Make a difference in thickness. See the lump? It's coming up with my outside hand. It means I'm doing my job. If you don't have a lump coming up with your hand, you're wasting your time. You're not really making it cool. You're not getting any taller. Get the water out. Put the water back. Make a difference in thickness. Pull up. Note again my elbows, my nose. My hands are always connected. And center up. Clean the water out. This time I'm going to turn my fingers a little bit this way so we can make that bottom a little thinner. That's thinner again. Come all the way up. Note I'm coming all the way up the pot, taking it off the top. Something like that. Wooden rib, perpendicular. The thumb is on the edge of the wooden rib. Over my elbow it is. It's not way out here. It's in tight. Set my lip. Wooden rib, right knee, pointing to left thigh. Holding it really tight. Making it nice and round. Paper towel tool. Making a U. Making it gently over here. A little bit of water in there. I want to try to make these as symmetrical as you can right now. Later on, asymmetry is actually okay. In fact, it's kind of great. But for now, make them as symmetrical as you can. So now I'm going to show you how to keep one. Okay, we're going to keep this to practice trimming it. So we're going to stop the wheel. We kind of cleaned it up. We're going to take our thumbs, put them like so. Keep our thumbs down on the wheel head very tightly. If one side comes up and the other, you'll end up having a foot that doesn't really match. And we'll pull all the way through. And this pot then has a finished pot and has a so-called keeper. It is about 5 inches. It's a little more than 5. So it's a keeper. This is going to go on the table until I have to go, or until it starts to stiffen up where I can cover it up I don't really want to cover it up right now with plastic because if I do, it could deform it. Sometimes you do. You have to cover them up because you're leaving. So I want to leave this uncovered until it starts to get stiff, and as soon as it gets stiff enough that I can turn it upside down, I want to turn it upside down. At that point, I'm waiting for it to get leather hard, and leather hard is when it's stiff enough that if you bend it a little too far, it breaks. Okay, so that's when you're going to want to trim. We'll talk about that a week from Tuesday. Some of you might save some pots if you get them where they're this thin, where they're, I should measure. I'll show you. So I'm looking for the inside of the needle tool. It's about right there. So you can kind of see that's how thick it is. Really, if your pot was that thick to begin with, like next week, you could probably save them. But note that it's that thick all the way through. Okay, it's that thick all the way to the bottom. So right now, the needle tool is straight up and down here, and it's straight up and down on the inside. If it's not straight up and down on the inside, in other words, it's like this, it means that the bottom is thicker than the top. And so you want to make sure you measure the side of every single pot. Because if you measure them, then it means that I don't necessarily have to. And it's really just a way to teach yourself instead of waiting to find out from me if the pot's okay. So measure, you want them to be no thicker than a quarter of an inch. Anyway, I hope this helps. There will be some older students or some higher level students in here, and they'll probably help you if you ask nicely. There usually are some continuing ed students in there, and they'll probably ask if you, or help if you ask nicely. Don't worry too much about how you do, just make sure that you do. Make sure you get in here and throw. You want to throw at least 2 or 3 times before we see each other again, before a week from Tuesday. And whenever you sign up for your 1 on 3, I might mention that right now. There's a sign-up sheet Carlos will have. You guys got the email. In the sign-up sheet, you need to make sure you sign up for 1 on 3. 1 of me, and 2 or 3 of you guys. Don't miss that sign-up because it will help you. It's like 5 hours of practice because I'm sitting across from you holding your hand. So don't miss that. Anyway, hope this helps. I'm going to cut the video, and I have another segment showing you how to clean up. So have a great day. Link. Well, I'm back again because I forgot to tell you how to clean up. So, any spheres that you don't use, they need to be pugged. Don't save them. Don't put them back in the bucket. If you can hand them to somebody to use, that's fine. But don't put them back in the bucket. So all this used clay will get pulled or put into that pug mill. Okay? So that's going to go there. We're going to make sure we clean that. We're going to make sure we clean the wheel. I'm going to go get a big sponge in a second. These blue and white wheels, these come apart really easily. They just pull apart. Here in a second, I'll show you how to put the pull and put the other ones on. So this is going to go into some buckets. I'll be back to get the camera in a second. This is Anne Marie. She's very nice, very helpful.
I'll be here Thursday if I need help.
She'll be here Thursday if you need help. So, there are some buckets here at this table. One of them is going to have water in them, or in it. The other one won't. The one that doesn't have water in it, you're going to put the clay in. The one that has water in it, you'll rinse your pieces out in that particular bucket. So, big sponge. And unfortunately, this doesn't have water in it right now. Enough. Actually, that one does. So I'm going to rinse in this bucket. I'm going to get most of the clay out of it. I'm not going to take this to the sink. There's no reason to rinse it any more than in this bucket. We don't want clay getting in the sink. If clay gets in the sink, the plumbers aren't happy. And if the plumbers aren't happy, Steve's not happy. If Steve's not happy, I don't know who's not happy. So anyway, we want to clean it out for the most part like so. We want to make sure that we don't have any tools in here. Okay, there are no tools. I'm going to cant or take most of the water off of this into one of these buckets in the sink. When I start seeing clay, I'm going to bring it back over here and dump it in here. Again, make sure there are no tools in the bucket. If a tool gets in this reclaim and gets into our mixer or gets into our pug mill, it will make a real mess. And we'll have wood chunks or metal chunks in our clay for a month. So the bucket is fairly clean. The bucket goes back over here. And this piece of paper towel tool goes in the trash. And I'm going to go back over to the wheel, and I'll bring the camera in a second. So, big sponge, clean that, clean your table. Tools go back in the container. I'm going to go get clean water. I'm going to clean my sponge and wipe it off one more time. Wipe off the switch. This goes here. This goes here. Please don't put stools or anything on the wheel head in case the pedal gets stepped on. If the pedal got stepped on and the stool was up here, it would fly somewhere and you wouldn't want that to happen. Make sure you turn the wheel off. And then you can put the pedal here. Clay's going to go in the pug mill. At this point in time, you need to go outside and get a mop and mop every single time you throw on the wheel. So, yeah, let me do this first, and then you can follow me. So just so you know how these work, the big one goes in the back. You shimmy it on like so. Make sure it's all the way on. This one, you lift up the front like this and snap it into place. There are little ears here. When you push down those ears, it releases. And you shimmy it back off, and that's how you take it on and off. Okay, and now we're going to go outside and show you where the mop bucket is. She is so good. Pizza oven for pizza later. Mop buckets, mops. And now we're going to go inside, and I can do that. We'll go inside, and I'll show you where to get water. Thank you.
Anyone like to start with water? Andrew? Austin? Yes? No? Steve?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So, see the studio, that's where we were. This is the clay room back here. Turn the light on. And this is how the sink works. This is where you turn the water on and off. We don't ever touch these. Okay, this is connected to the washing machine, that's why. So we put the hose in the bucket and turn this on. And this is going to sound trivial, but it's very important. Fill the buckets up to here, because the solution to pollution is dilution. You don't want to just put this much water in there. You'll get 2 swipes and your mop will be dirty, your water will be dirty. So fill the bucket up full. Anyway, a little bit long. Thanks for paying attention. Look forward to meeting you guys. Have a great day. Bye.